And just thinking, to have an all-knowing Hal Jordan alongside the new Spectre, that would take away from something that made the character of the new Spectre unique. And again, I have to say, I'm really looking forward to talking about the Crispus Allen Spectre. For me, it's a real shame that Crispus' time as the Spectre was so relatively short. But now, to wrap up this look at Hal Jordan's time as the Spectre, I would like to spend at least a couple of minutes reflecting on the legacy of this era and the Spectre's history. Again, it's 5 years and change. In terms of the positives, I can think of a couple of important positives to take out of Hal Jordan's time as the Spectre. The first thing is that it allowed for the return of two iconic characters who had been off the table for a period of time. Well, certainly the Spectre had been off the table for a while. And of course, the big joke was that Hal was never really gone. I mean, he kept on popping up here and there, whether it be in flashback stories or time travel stories. But this was a way of really bringing Hal back into the present day and not having to come up with different gimmicks like time travel or alternate reality. It's especially important for a comic book company. Sure, there have been some very great comic book deaths and death stories over the last close to 3 decades. And you can certainly look at the ramifications of a character's death over the short term and the long term across a variety of titles within the line of comics. But at the end of the day, when you kill off a character, you're taking away that potential for profit. And so to bring back two characters or concepts at the same time and merge them together, that was really neat. The second thing is that it allowed for writers to do something different with Hal Jordan. If you go back and you read all the Hal Jordan Spectre stories, you're getting a very different Hal Jordan from the one who appeared before and after this run. And that's important, that Hal's characterization was different during this time. It was important to see that he was this tormented being who was in search of redemption. The reason why Hal became Parallax in the first place was because the character, the whole concept of Green Lantern had come to be seen as stale by 1994. So to have Hal as the cocky hotshot pilot as the host of the Spectre probably wouldn't have come off so well. People have said, well, it's really hitting us over the head. This is just Hal wearing the Spectre's cloak. So my hat goes off to all of the different creators who worked on the Hal Jordan Spectre at this time, presenting a different side of the character. And for people who were missing the classic interpretation of Hal Jordan, this era was important in that it certainly created that sense of absence which made the heart grow fonder. So that when Hal came back as Hal Jordan, there were those who complained that DC was going back to the well or recycling things, and they had less than pleasant things to say about Hal Jordan coming back. But at the same time, there were so many readers who were excited to see Hal back as Green Lantern, and that's thanks to this run on the Spectre. In terms of why Hal's time as a Spectre was so limited, first off, it was the fact that for 40 years, Hal was, for many, the Green Lantern. He was certainly the predominant Green Lantern of the pre-crisis, even post-crisis reality for a point. I mean, a character like Hal Jordan, it can be very hard to see them switch to another costume identity, especially when it's along the lines of going from a very human, a very mortal concept like Green Lantern to becoming something like the host of a divine entity. And so, really, right from the conclusion of Day of Judgment, there were a lot of people saying, okay, well, you know, we know it's not going to stay like this forever. It's not a matter of if Hal Jordan comes back as Green Lantern, it's a matter of when. And, you know, you think about it, 5 years and change, turns out that was a pretty good run of time, keeping Hal in that role before finally turning back the clock and saying, okay, it's time to bring him back to his more iconic roots. And then the other thing which really contributed to Hal not being the Spectre long term was the fact that it's Hal. And there's just something so metatextual about Hal. He just has that indomitable force of will. He just demands that his presence be felt, not only within the pages of DC Comics, but amongst the fandom. You know, the fact that even in death he didn't go away. He was always popping up, always being referenced. And so, given that Hal's character is so strong, it really made it difficult to strike that balance between Hal and the Spectre. You know, certainly at points during Jim Corrigan's time as the Spectre, it appeared that Jim and the Spectre were very much one, and they spoke with one voice. But, I mean, there are plenty of other times. The first volume of Spectre alone showing that, no, there were actually two voices. There was that back and forth, that dialogue between Jim Corrigan and the Spectre. Even if they weren't standing face to face, they were still very much aware of each other's presence. They both had that voice, and that just didn't really come off during Hal's time as the Spectre, and that it was Hal doing the talking all the time. And yeah, in different titles there were still those spooky green word balloons where you could see that it was Hal talking but the Spectre's voice. But I mean, that was it. It was really Hal doing the majority of the talking, with more of it being the Spectre screaming into Hal's ears at points, as Jeff Johns put it so well in Green Lantern Rebirth. And so I think that's something which a lot of the fans missed, was that back and forth between the host and the Wrath. And so given those two things, that's why, in my opinion, Hal's time as the Spectre was something that was going to be limited. And sadly, when it comes to the next host of the Spectre, Chris Basalin, that version of the Spectre would also have a limited short life, although for a very different reason, which I will get into down the road on Comics and History. So that's my look at the Hal Jordan Spectre. I hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed putting it together. In terms of episode number 132, when this recording hits the airwaves, it's going to be sometime, I would say, in August. And the show is not going away. But given what's going on my end, I think I should be cautious and say that things are probably going to slow down a bit here in Comics and History land. My daughter, Victoria, is going to be entering public school. She'll be going into junior kindergarten. And of course, as I mentioned on episode number 130, Victoria is on the autistic spectrum. And so her transition to school is probably going to be paved with challenges along the way. I mean, hey, for any 4-year-old, going to school for the first time is challenging. But for those who are on the spectrum, there's another layer of challenge to work through. So I don't doubt that I'm not going to have a whole lot of free hours coming up in September. On top of that, September is always a busy time for me in my teaching life. So all this is to say that I hope that by the time this recording hits the airwaves, I'll have had a chance to record some more episodes, get them in the can to carry us through the end of summer and early fall. But if you don't see anything coming up after a couple weeks' time, don't worry, I'm still here. I'm just very, very busy, and I will get back to recording as soon as I can. I have decided what I'm going to talk about for episode number 132. With all that's going on with Superman and Doomsday Clock, it's really kicked up my nostalgia for Superman. He was my first go-to guy in the world of superheroes. And so I want to look at an interesting time in the Man of Steel's history. It was a time when he wasn't even called the Man of Steel. Thanks to a lawsuit, things had to change for Superman for a time. And I'm referring to that period of time when Superman became Superman Blue. So I'll be talking about that for episode number 132. In the meantime, if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at comicsandhistory@gmail.com or head on over to Facebook, like the Comics and History Facebook page, get updates there, leave some feedback. Thank you to Jason and others who leave such kind words on the Facebook page. Until hopefully 2 weeks' time, or until the next time I'm free to chat with you about all things comics, this class is dismissed.